Welcome to Lead Different.
What if leadership isn't about building influence, but about healing what's broken? Welcome back to the Lead Different podcast. Today we're exploring a side of leadership that often goes unspoken, the power of presence, clarity, and deep interior healing. I'm honored to introduce someone I've known for over 30 years, Father Michael Garcia, a Navy veteran who spent years in the world of technology before answering a late-in-life call to the priesthood. Father Michael is now the pastor of a vibrant, growing parish in New Mexico. He brings a unique mastery mindset to his ministry, refining his calling to make complex truths accessible to everyone he serves. In this episode, we dive into Father Michael's journey from the military to the altar. We discuss how addressing past wounds is essential for any leader, the balance of truth and humility in shepherding a community, and why empowering others is the mark of a successful mission. This is a profound conversation about what it means to lead from a place of wholeness. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned as we learn to lead different with Father Michael Garcia.
Why not leadership? Why not lead different?
Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Father Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. It's fun to have you here. Number one, I've known you for over 30 years, and I've learned so much from watching you grow as a person. As I think when I met you, you were just out of the Navy, and starting your life to living a pretty full life before even being ordained.
Sure.
And becoming a priest. And then I got to spend some with you staff last week or a couple of weeks ago at a retreat for your staff. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a full circle moment for me. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
You know, we had your predecessor here, Father John Carney, on the show, and we just a fabulous conversation. We talked about a lot of things. You've got some things in common. You're also a veteran. You're a Navy veteran, so you spent some time in the Navy. Then, as I said, you were ordained later in life. And I'd like to, let's talk about a little bit of that story. Let your listeners know a little bit about where you came from. So, grew up in Albuquerque.
Yes.
And joined the Navy at how old were you?
I guess 18. I turned 18 when I enlisted. And so I grew up, I don't know if people are familiar with the Morales neighborhood, but that was my...
Well, they will be after this.
Yeah. And some schooling in Catholic schools. Charles for a little bit. I went to St. Francis on Broadway for a little bit. And then I ended up at Washington Middle School, which was a culture change for me. And then on to Albuquerque High. And when I decided to go into the military, I think I was at a very interesting time in my life because I had lost my father when I was about 15 years old. He died of a liver cancer. And I needed some direction in my life, and this was an opportunity. My brother, Richard, who was in the Navy at the time, also talked to me about it, so I did. So I joined the Navy, the whole idea of doing more before the whole world does, before you wake, before 4 a.m. or something like that. I remember there being like that slogan. So the idea of just being able to go out and do something bigger than myself was, I think, a real law. Yeah. And so I joined, and I did 4 years of active service duty. This is from 1986 to, and now from 90 to 94 was inactive reserves.
Okay. So you did your time in the Navy, and then what did you do after that?
So part of what drives me is I've always had this desire to help people.
Mm-hmm. That's the contribute in you,
right.
for sure.
So I wanted to actually be a police officer. So I went through the whole application process. Interestingly enough, I think in the Lord's own way, he didn't want me there.
Right.
I passed everything except they told me that they thought I had PTSD. And so, but back then they didn't really guide you or steer you on like how to address that.
Right.
Right. So you just sort of accepted it, you moved on, and you went about trying to fulfill your goals and dreams. And so I was a little wandering,
Yeah.
like what am I going to do? And I was doing different things, and I ended up being very involved with technology. I loved this idea of the internet when it first became popular,
Right.
and so I have this mind to really dig deep into things
Right.
and to understand how they work and what's
So
the
for everyone listening, that's the mastery in him, right? He loves to learn
Yeah.
things at a deep level. Yeah.
I mean, I started to learn like the disk operating system where,
Yeah.
you typed in commands, and then when Windows came out, it was awesome to see this graphical interface, and then Netscape came out, and you could now see things
influence.
A very interesting time in my life because I had lost my father when I was about 15 years old. He died of liver cancer, and I needed some direction in my life, and this was an opportunity. And my brother, Rich, who was in the Navy at the time, also talked to me about it, so I did. So I joined the Navy. The whole idea of doing before the whole world does before you wake, before 4 a.m. or something like that. I
Right.
remember there being like that slogan. So the idea of just being able to go out to something bigger than myself was, I think, a real draw.
Yeah.
And so I joined, and I did 4 years of active service duty. This is from 1986 to 90, and then from 90 to 94, it was inactive reserves.
Okay. So you did your time in the Navy, and then what did you do after that?
So, well, part of what drives me is I've always had this desire to help people.
The contribute in you,
Right.
for sure.
So I wanted to actually be a police officer. So I went through the whole application process. But interestingly enough, I think in the Lord's own way, he didn't want me there. I passed everything except they told me that they thought PTSD. And so, but back then they didn't really guide or steer you on like how to address that.
Right.
Right. So you just sort of accepted it, you moved on, and you went about trying to fulfill your goals and dreams. And so I was a little wandering,
Yeah.
like what am I going to do? And I was doing different things, and I ended up being very involved with technology.
Right.
I loved this idea of the internet when it first became popular.
Right.
And so I have this mind to really dig deep into things and
Right.
to understand how they work and what's
So
the
for everyone listening, it's the mastery in him, right? He loves to learn
Yeah.
things at a deep level. Yeah.
I mean, I first started to learn like the disk operating system where you typed in commands, and then when Windows came out, it was awesome to see this graphical interface, and then Netscape came out, and you could now see things from across the world, and chat rooms were a big thing. So all of that drew my interest, and so I ended up working for a couple of companies, doing technical support and learning how to how this technology works, so that I could help people fix their problems.
Right.
And eventually, I started, working. My last position before I entered the priesthood was, or entered into seminary, was working for a company called Dual Language Education in Mexico. And I'm kind of their IT guy in a sort of way. It wasn't. I don't think that was really the position, but that I did for them.
You were an IT guy before there were IT guys, right? Yeah.
So, and there too, always like supporting, helping, right? Trying to solve problems,
Right.
Trying to make things accessible and simple.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that, but I think the draw to the priesthood was always there.
Right.
Right. It was always there from my youngest days, but I kept putting it off, ignoring it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it had to do with, some of my own struggles, some things that happened to me. But, and if you want to talk about that, that's fine. But, ultimately in 2010, I made that sort of decision. Why not?
Yeah. That's love it. Yeah.
Why not? I mean, I've been resisting it for all sorts of reasons. We justify a lot of things in our life, and we're afraid. We have fears. Step out and do what we know the Lord wants us to do, And I finally was able to say yes. And I didn't have any excuses, because I used to have a lot of excuses.
Leadership isn't about building it.
I was kind of their IT guy in a sort of way. It wasn't, I don't think that was really the position, but that's what I did for them.
You were an IT guy before there were IT guys, right? Yeah.
So, and there too, always like supporting, helping, right? Trying to solve problems,
right?
Trying to make things accessible and simple.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that, but I think the draw to the priesthood was always there.
Right.
Right. It was always there from my youngest days, but I kept putting it off, ignoring it. Yeah. And I think a lot of it had to do with, some of my own struggles, some things that happened to me. But, and if you want to talk about that, that's fine. But, ultimately in 2010, I made that sort of decision. Why not?
Yeah. That's love it. Yeah.
Why not? I've been resisting it for all sorts of reasons. We justify a lot of things in our life, and we're afraid. We have fears to step out and do what we know the Lord wants us to do. And I finally was able to say yes. And I didn't have any excuses, because I used to have a lot of excuses for why I didn't go.
Right.
And now I didn't. And so I entered seminary in 2010, and I've been a priest now almost 11 years in May.
So I want to definitely dig into that a little bit. So one of the things I know, so I met my wife in 1989, and you guys are cousins. So I met you very soon thereafter.
Yeah.
We've spent many Christmases, Thanksgivings, and holidays together.
Yeah.
You've been to our house. We've been to your house, Aunt Rose's, which is your grandma Rose. You know, one of the things I admired so much about you is what a great caretaker you were for her. You know, I know she raised you, and but then, you know, she lived a long time, and you took care of her. And so one of the things I've always thought is, well, Michael's putting off, I know, we all know he wants to be a priest, but he's putting that off because he wants to take care of Grandma Rose. And sure enough, that was something you did soon after she passed.
Yes.
But there's more to it. And I would like to talk about that because, you know, leadership isn't just about leading from the pulpit or leading from the front or the big speech, the big rah-rah speech. Sometimes leadership is about self, overcoming those things that held us back. So what was it for you, other than taking care of beautiful Grandma Rose until she was gone, that kept you from making that leap and saying, you know what, I'm going to sign up and go to seminary?
Yeah. So yeah, beyond my concern for her, I think there was a lot of insecurities. You know, I was very insecure, and I think it stemmed from some childhood experiences that I had that I've never really talked about other than with some people. But I think it's important, you know, after a certain point that people need to be aware that, you know, we all have things that we've dealt with since childhood, and sometimes they don't get addressed, and then that directs your life, right? Because you're living under these lies, these agreements that you've made from trauma in your life. And so you make excuses like, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned, because, you know, I had that sort of attitude all the way up until I went to my first vocation retreat, which is in the 90s, early 90s.
Right.
And you'll never know who was the vocation director at the time.
Oh, I would guess maybe somebody by the name of John Carney.
John Carney, right? And when I met him, and I don't, you know, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I'm just saying that talking to him and seeing him made me think, yeah, I can do this. You know, this is a military guy. This is a guy who's got experience, you know, and, you know, he's a man, right? And he's faithful, you know, he's committed himself, you know, so why can't you do it? Right. So anyway, that aside, you know, so we make it, you know, and a lot of it stems from our wounds, our hurts, you know, that we haven't properly addressed. And I think that's part of what I like to do with people, is to address those things so that they can step out into what St. John Paul II said is be made for greatness, right? So we need to, you know, address those things. And I had to address those things in my life, you know, even into the priesthood, I had to address them. So, because, you know, you find yourself, if you're not always in formation of yourself as a priest, how are you going to form your people, right? So you need to address your issues, your dysfunctions, if you will, and order those rightly, so that you can then see in others and help them, at least, you know, try to lead them to the water.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Well, you know, you talked about you've always had a passion or a calling to help others. When did you realize that your calling wasn't about being the center of attention and being, because when we go to mass, you're the man, you're up there. I think you realized it wasn't about that. It's about serving others. How early do you, in your formation or even in your calling to the priesthood, did you realize that?
Oh, I think you realize that at least in the, you know, your first years of priesthood. Yeah. For me, at least, I can't speak for others, but you recognize that the people that you have been given are the people who help make your ministry better. Right. So it's, for me, it's not about controlling every aspect of the ministry or even as a pastor controlling every aspect of of what happens in the parish. Although at the end of the day, you are the one responsible. You do have that accountability.
Right.
But it's about empowering people to do the things that they feel called to do, but forming them so they can do it well.
Yeah.
Right. And so recognizing that, and tying it back to, I always tell people almost every boss I've ever had, right, in any job, the majority were women. Okay. And they teach you something about, because the women are the backbone of the church.
Right.
Right. And they've been the backbone of the church since the beginning. They were the ones who provided, all the needs for the disciples.
Right.
They were the ones who supported them with money and food and care. And that's something that I've always been distinctly aware of.
Right.
And so, but I want this for all the people, all the people that I serve to feel like they are a part of something greater than themselves, but they're all contributing. It's just simple gospel principles, right?
Yeah.
Of one body, many parts.
Right.
Right. And so that's what I'm trying and keep trying to do in my ministry, is to help those people and support them and be a part of the church and not just stand by, not just bystanders.
And you've got a unique challenge. You've got one of the biggest congregations in the city. When you talk about serving 4,500 people over how many masses every weekend, plus all the ministries, and you don't have a big staff. I got a chance to meet him. So you guys are running a really efficient operation with a few very talented people.
It's quite
in the right
incredible.
seats.
Well, I mean, just yesterday, Ash Wednesday.
Yeah.
I think we had about 1,600 over the course of the three masses that we had yesterday.
Wow.
So 1,600 parishioners came, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and yeah, we do have a vibrant, growing parish, and I've got a wonderful staff. I have to say, I've been at 3 assignments in my young priesthood, right? As a pastor. My first one was actually at the Newman Center,
Right.
where I was the associate. But under my 3 assignments, I've had nothing but wonderful, faith-filled people in that parish and in my staffs.
Yeah.
And they've all done everything. My success is because of them.
Right.
So, yeah, I just, I'm so excited. I just started, in July. In July I'll give my 1-year state of the parish address. But
Great.
but you know what? Nothing's impossible when you have people who really care about their faith.
Yeah, and your contribute just comes out in everything that you say. You're always talking about helping others move forward and having them contribute to the overall mission of the parish. What does a community need most, in your opinion, from its leader? Is it clarity? Is it strength? Is it compassion? What is the most important thing you feel the community needs from you as the leader?
I think it's important is 2 things.
Yeah.
Truth and humility. Right. And they go hand in hand because, we proclaim and profess, a message of truth, right? The person of Jesus Christ. But how that all plays out, is really in the way we live our lives. So as a pastor, it's a very difficult balance because you want to say I'm striving for humility, but you can never admit that you're humble. Right?
Right. You don't
I'm
want to say.
proud of my humility, we used to say,
Right. As Sophia said, my daughter, when she was little, she said, "Dad, am I the best at being humble?" Right.
Exactly.
You don't want to ask that question.
Yeah. Right. So it's always a work in progress, right? Is, you need to strive for humility because that's what, our faith calls us to. But at the same time, you shouldn't be acknowledging it, right?
Right.
Because true humility acknowledges your strengths and your weaknesses, right? And so it's being honest with yourself. And that's what they want from a pastor. They want honesty.
Yeah.
The other day, someone asked me a question, And I'm going to admit it. I lied. Okay, I lied. Because
Was it a white lie to protect their feelings? Or?
no, it was to protect an embarrassment about myself, right? But it wasn't like I deliberately thought about this and said, "Yeah, I'm going to lie." It was like an instant reaction to something that hadn't been addressed to me in a long time.
Right.
And and it goes back to what I was talking about, how sometimes the pains of the past,
Right.
even though you think you've resolved them, they come back.
Right.
And in that instant, and so I called this person later and said, "Look, it's not true." I said, "And I'm sorry, I just reacted." And and that's what I think people want from their pastors, to admit that they don't have it all together.
Yeah.
We're with them. We're journeying with them, like Father John Carney says, I think I when I saw him in his interview, he said, "You lead from the front." Right. That's what we need to do. We need to lead, not just by moralizing or preaching to them in a certain way. Every sermon is a sermon to myself.
Right.
Right. You need to preach. Practice what you preach.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so so there's always opportunities for growth. Right. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's really good. So what you're saying is, I think the most important thing is the humility, and being honest. I love that you talk about that, because one of the things I've learned in working with the vocations, working with priests, is you're human.
Yeah.
You're just as human as we are. My exposure to that side of the ministry was, when in the early 2000s with the Jesuits at Immaculate Conception. I used to play golf with Father Rodriguez and Father McGowan, and I got to know, hey, these guys are, at the end of the day, they're people, but they have a really important job, and we hold them up to a really high standard. But we have to remember that you're human. So I love that you told a story of, sometimes we get put on the spot and we say something, but you did the best you could. You called them up and said, "Hey, I actually told you a lie, but here's why," and then you explain yourself.
Sure.
And then you move on, and you probably gain more respect from that than from the lie that you had told.
I think so. And it's important, that we do our best to be honest and be have integrity, right? That doesn't mean we're perfect in every conversation or everything, not even in sometimes our preaching. Sometimes we let our own opinions be interjected into the preaching.
Right.
And so we have to be very careful and aware of that. And that's why priests need to go to confession too, right?
Right.
Because we have weaknesses, and we know that we're in constant need of the strength of God in our lives in order to carry out His mission, right? Because at the end of the day, when a priest goes to bed at night, he says his prayers. He there's an opportunity when he does his night prayer to make a good examination of his conscience, and then to then entrust everything to the Lord, right?
Right.
And the Lord brings it all together.
Yeah.
And he makes, he can convert that to grace.
Right.
If you let him. And that grace will overflow into not only the life of the priest, but to his parishioners.
Yeah.
Right? Because as the priest goes, go the parishioners.
Right. No, it's really good. So we touched on your contribute comes across. Let's talk about mastery.
Okay.
Mastery. What does mastery look like for you in spiritual leadership? Where do you see yourself really digging deep and learning, and where does it come into play?
Well, in spiritual leadership, I think mastery is knowing the human person, right? The church has so much experience in knowing the human person, right? And we don't always need to reinvent the way things are done. I mean, there's different spiritualities, right, and different approaches to our relationship with Christ, in the sense of, one might like, certain devotions, a certain spiritual life. I remember at one point I was very interested in various religious orders, right? But then, you realize that the Lord calls you to a specific thing, and if you embrace that, you'll grow. So I think having that discipline of not chasing after all sorts of devotions and things like that, but focus, right? Focus. And so I think in the spiritual life, I want people to focus, focus on, one thing and do it well. I always tell people, say one rosary bead for me. Just one bead, Father? Yeah. Because if you say that one rosary, that Hail Mary,
Right.
with great love, that's as powerful as just rattling off a bunch of them.
Right.
Right? Focused and with your heart and your mind, because that's ultimately what prayer is, right? It's the lifting of the heart and mind to God.
Yeah.
Right? So when we do that, that's why it's so important. Remember that, I don't know if you're familiar with what they call the Shema. It's the prayer of Israel. Said,
Yes.
the Lord is God,
Yes.
and He's one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and your strength, right?
Yeah.
That's prayer.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you do that well, you can't go wrong. And so I try to, as far as a spiritual life is, let's stay focused. Let's look at the important things and discard the unimportant things. And there, so many great spiritual writers out there that, I don't have to really invent them. I can just point them to them and say, here, it's like the Baptist pointed to Christ, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go.
What keeps you growing instead of coasting? What's the drive to keep learning more?
A desire, I think. Well, I want to say that it's a desire to know.
Yeah.
Right? To know. It's like our, when I first got into technology, I think there's always a curiosity. Now, curiosity can be good or bad, right? It's kind of neutral, and it depends on where you take it. But this curiosity for and to use the imagination, right, are important, because the imagination is a gift from God,
right?
And it allows us to enter into these deeper mysteries. We wouldn't have science without people who imagined what what we could discover and what could be revealed to us through the natural, light of reason. And then you have, divine revelation, which helps us to imagine what life with God will be like. So I think we're all built with it,
right?
But some of us haven't been able to tap into it,
right?
And so this curiosity, the desire to know more, the desire to know truth, to face reality with some kind of understanding. And so, when it comes to like technologies, that's always been, I think, one of the things, that I've really enjoyed is how does a computer work, right? Mm-hmm. How does this motherboard get, store this data, or how does it, all those things used to very much interest me, how does the internet work, And now, of course, like you mentioned, artificial intelligence, And so, when it started to come on, I think it was during COVID.
Right.
And ChatGPT became the popular thing to play around with. I said, I'm going to get on this because I want to know what's it all about. Right.
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear. You didn't just get into it. You took a course at a major university. Where was it?
So I took an online course through MIT.
Right.
Yeah. And
very early on.
I'd like to brag that it was like, but it's professional development, right?
Sure.
And I think that's what I do, and I thank the Archdiocese for allowing me to do that. Because I was seeing already like some of the potential pitfalls, right? But also the potential for goodness.
Right.
And like any technology, it can be used for good or bad. So I wanted to understand, what is this, Now, it was mostly on generative AI because, there's different types of AI.
Right.
This one is mostly what people are consuming, right? Is the chat bot. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to understand now, I admit some of the math and science behind it is a little above me. This is MIT after all, and they give you these things to look at. I'm like, whoa, okay. But I think overall, I was very much interested not only in its uses and its potential, but also its potential ethical problems.
Right.
And, and then the concerns that people were bringing to me, like, is AI going to take jobs? Is AI going to become, like for people, a replacement for relationships?
Right.
And so those are serious questions, and I started to wonder if the church was going to speak on something. And they came out with a couple of documents, and I'm still waiting for Pope Leo to do something. But it's so AI is very much fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that on your, maybe that's the title of the show. You
Okay.
can't spell faith without AI.
I like
but
that.
I like that for you. It's interesting, your mastery really comes through because like I said, the average person, we all learned about AI around the same time. The average person went and looked up a couple articles. We Googled something and we kind of thought, no, you took an MIT course and learned as much as you could so that you could contribute and to the greater cause, to the knowledge of
Yeah.
not only your parish and the people you worked with, but even the archdiocese, and you're looking for those documents that, okay, what's our position on this? And we were talking in our men's group last night. The topic came up of the use of technology. I read somewhere, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, as you're very much into it. An 18-year-old today, if they live to 80 years old, they're going to spend 20 years of their life looking at their cell phone. 8 hours a day on average, an adult, a Gen Zer, looks at their phone. So you're talking 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of scrolling, and then 8 hours of working. When do you have time for human relationships? And how do we set those limits? I'm talking to a school in a couple of weeks about this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how do we set those limits so that we're not consumed by it, so that we can have real relationships? I know there's programs out there, but what's your advice as someone who's definitely uses technology,
Yeah.
but also has to set limits for himself?
Sure. And I think, this is where the call for discipline matters. And not discipline in a sort of a punishing sense. Discipline is always ordered to the good of the person.
Right.
So, in one sense, you can only do so much through human, effort. But in another sense, if you're a believer and you have faith that the Lord pours grace on you, that grace builds on nature, right? We say,
Right.
and so it helps us to do what we are not capable of doing on our own.
Right.
And so definitely there's a need for grace in this moment of life, with all this explosive growth of technology, and some of it very good, some of it not very good, right? Again, it depends on how one makes use of it, right? You can use our phone for, I remember as a kid thinking, I would love one of those tricorders from Star Trek.
Right.
And here we have basically a tricorder, right?
Yeah.
Where we can now look up symptoms if we're sick. We can
Yeah.
do recipes. We can do all sorts of these sort of things that people, it's not very interesting, but it's helpful.
Right.
But we can also steer into dark places, and so how do you discipline yourself in that? Well, I think it's a matter of returning to a right use of anything.
Right.
We can use anything wrong, and I think this is important to always go back to our roots as believers and say, am I using the things that I've been given for the glory of God or not? You ask yourself that question. Because someone asked me, a good friend of mine named Jim, he said, could the Holy Spirit use AI? Could he work through AI? And I said, of course he can,
Yeah.
right? So could the evil one.
Right.
Okay, so it depends on what you're using it for, right? We invite either one in,
Right.
depending on the dispositions of our souls, our hearts, our intentions, right? And intentions matter. In the Catholic Church, intention is important, right? Because God sees that, and then he can use that, right? So if our hearts are looking for bad things, we're going to get bad things. And the same for good things. And so, but it's a matter of having a good faith life, a sacramental life, a prayer life that is always, again, heart, mind, and soul
Right.
directed toward the heavenly things, to God. And so I think that when we're using technology with that frame of mind, then I think it can be used for good. But if we're using it in just a worldly sense, in a sense that's not going to get us closer to God,
Right.
then we're going to see the results of that.
So I'm going to give a little commercial. I just installed Shift on my phone, shiftyourphone.com. I had an opportunity to talk to the person who founded the company. And it's an amazing app that takes all social media, all games, all entertainment apps, and you can't even access them through the internet. It locks your phone for as long as you decide to do it. So I put a schedule on. I'm actually going to lock my phone for the entire Lent, because what it forces me to do is, we're so used to that instant answer, right? You're having a conversation. Oh, did you hear what so and so said about, at the summit in Geneva? And, no, I didn't hear it. Next thing you know, somebody's pulling out their phone and looking it up. And you don't need it. You can still continue the conversation. Okay, well, what he said was this. Well, you don't need to prove that he or she said it. You can just have a conversation about that. And it's a richer conversation versus all of a sudden everybody's got their phones out and they're looking at what exactly did he say. Next thing you know, the table devolves into people sharing videos, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of a real conversation. And so we were talking about that in men's group last night. The biggest thing, though, is children are, the algorithm is strong, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. They're looking at what you're looking. The technology can see where your eyes are on the screen, right? Your phone has that. So they know what you're looking for. So and it's listening, and we know that, right? Our phones listen to us.
Sure.
So that, if you and I are having this conversation about AI, I'll probably get an ad about, hey, how much do you know about AI? Later on in the day when I open up my phone.
That's how I got the ad from MIT.
Right? you were looking at AI, and it's next thing you know, you're in the court. But, for children, it can be so addictive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because, I recently did a retreat I do an end of year retreat for CEOs where we look at our previous year and then we plan our goals for the next year. But one of the parts was, what is something that we want to stop doing? To a person, they wanted to stop doom scrolling.
Yes.
They understood how much time they were spending just scrolling, because you start with, I'm going to look up what the president said at the international summit, which leads to a video about, this happened in Minnesota, which leads to a video, this pop artist was there,
right.
And then that pop artist was dating. So next thing you know, you've watched an hour of YouTube videos, none of which are related to the original thing that you started with. So what's your recommendation when parents come to you? What are you doing, in terms of bringing that to families? Because it has a severe impact. Kids get so addicted that, they get violent if you take away their phones.
Sure. No, I think you bring something up that's very important. That I think what we need to do, and this is just my observation, is that we need to bring people back into what is relationship, right? What is relationship? People will pick up their phone at night to have a conversation about their anxiety with ChatGPT, right? Or, they'll have conversations and think that they're real conversations, right? And ChatGPT is so good now that even like if I answer or ask a question, ChatGPT will tell me, "Okay, Father, here's it addresses me like if it knows me personally."
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I realize that it's like, oh yeah, right, So we pick up the phone instead of a rosary, right? We pick up a phone to get to find the answers instead of picking up our prayer books or our Bibles or
right.
So I think we need to reorient ourselves to what is right relationship, right? So we need to learn to engage with others, and I think for parents, they need to be cautious about the time that their children spend on technology, its usage, and of course the dangers. This has been a consistent problem,
right?
Even before AI started to become a thing. Texting was a problem.
Right. Well, books were a problem, right? When kids were, your head's always in a book. You're not talking to anybody.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So
or just stay in your room,
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be rooted in relationship. And that's ultimately what, faith is all about, relationship. And so people of faith can look at these things and say, okay, for my children, are we building a child who knows that physical and sensory, right? Things matter, right? That is true connection.
Right.
Whereas a machine is not going to give you that. You know,
Right.
it may give you answers, but it can't give you anything that stirs your soul like another human person can. Right? How those words can enter into you and change your life forever. You can read, books have always been, of course, for many people, a source of knowledge, but there's nothing like the interaction between a human being with one another, right? And that's what
That's how the early church passed on the gospel
before even anything was written, right?
Right.
They were living the faith in relationship with one another, in communion with God, and then it finally got written down, so that they could preserve it and share these things in their celebrations of the Eucharist and so forth, right? So, pretty amazing that God has given us the means, we just forget it.
Right. Well, and we can talk about this. Deacon Morris and I are in a fitness challenge together. We're trying to stay fit, and get ready for Three Hearts.
I think you could take them.
We're both keeping each other accountable. But here's the thing, and this goes back to technology. All the information we need is available to us.
Oh yeah,
it's right here in the laptop. It's in your phone. So whether or not you accomplish something is up to you. It's up to you to take action. We know. We can look up exactly what we need to eat to be healthy. We can look up exactly what we need to do to be stronger. We can look up all the great writings and all the great saints and all the biographies are there. It doesn't cost you a cent anymore. You pay your cable bill and then you get access to the internet, or your phone bill. But it's all there. So it's all about the execution, really.
We're not really talking about. Yeah, we're not deprived of information and knowledge, right? It's how we use it.
Yeah.
And whether we use it, right, for the good or the bad. One of the things that we say, when we start a liturgy of the Mass, one of the things that we begin with is called the Confiteor, and that's where we talk. We ask God to forgive us of our sins for the things we've done and the things we have failed to do. And I'm always interested in that things that we have failed to do, right? Because, we can say we do this and do that. But what about the things that we're not doing, right, that are actually far more beneficial, right? It's a strange connection for me. I'm just trying to point out that sometimes we only look at the things that we're doing that are either that we're making progress in or we're not making progress in, but we never look at, well, what have we failed?
Right.
It's interesting because one of the apps that I use is Google Notebook. And Google Notebook is an app where you can upload. It's typically what they call a retrieval augmented generative, AI, where it just works from your source documents.
Okay.
One of those is I use that to analyze documents, to analyze like I could put in some of the videos that you've recorded,
right,
and analyze those, right, and come up with common themes, right, and so it's so cool. And so I've done that with a couple of your videos and said, what did these two guest speakers actually have in common? What was their common,
common thread?
Thread, and so that's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
So again, access to all this knowledge, this information, but what are we going to do with it?
Right.
What do we do with it?
Well, you showed up as a really well-prepared guest today.
Are we making the world a better place or are you not, And so I think that's a big question we have to ask ourselves when it comes to technology and, all these burning questions, that.
No, these are great questions. And I'm glad to get your perspective as a priest and as a leader. Let's talk about Simplify, because one of the things I got to do when I did the workshop for your team is I got to attend your Mass. And one of the things I noticed was the reading was long. There was a lot to it. You were able to point out 3 different lessons from the readings. So we had the readings and the gospel. And then you were able to communicate it so simply. That's a gift, to take something so complex, pull up 6 different, lessons from it, and then provide them in a simple way that, I was able to get something out of it. So have you always been someone who's able to take stuff that's difficult and make it simple and easy to understand. Because I'm guessing that's a great gift to have as a priest.
I love words, and
Yeah.
I used to carry a little dictionary around when I was a kid, and I loved, I was in the spelling bee at one time, and some of my friends would say, "Are you carrying your Bible?" And it was, a dictionary or one of those meeting planners. Remember when the meeting planners first came out? So anyway, I always love words. I love understanding what they mean, and so. But I also knew that people needed simplicity. How do you take something very abstract or maybe very detailed, especially in our culture today with TikTok, right?
Yeah.
With people who have attention spans of like 0.
Right.
How do you distill such important truths and bring them down and simplify them? And I've gotten better over time. And to be honest, this is where AI helps, right? Because you can say, okay, here's what I want to talk about, and you do your research. And, like I love these books from Dr. John Bergsma that talk about every Sunday Mass readings, right? And he gives you his insights, and you pull something and you say, wow, this is great. So you explore that more, and then you're finally putting it together and you say, yeah, but, these days people aren't paying attention. They're not going to stand by for even a 10, 15-minute homily.
Father
right?
Rodriguez used to say, you don't save any souls after 5 minutes, right?
Right. So I've done occasionally. I think the longest homily as a priest I ever gave was like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And but people don't have that attention span anymore.
Right.
So you have to distill, and I think AI has helped a lot in this area because I've been using it for several years now, right? So you can take your concepts and you draft out everything you want, or you ask multiple questions and get that and put it all together and to say, distill this, into something simple, something that can be done in 300 words, and if you don't like it, you change it, you say, nah. Or I find what I do a lot too is ad lib, right? So if I have something in mind, but the Spirit tells me, no, in this moment, in this Mass, say this, right? And so you have to be open to both, right? You have the human work and then you have the divine work. Yeah. And that all comes together. And I don't know. Did I get off the topic of the question? Sometimes I'm just like the stream of.
No, it's you like words and you like simplifying things. I mean, that's really what I want to get to.
So exactly,
it's a gift, for sure.
And it's hard though. I mean, it seems simple at times, in a sense.
Right.
But you're like, okay, how do I really make this so that it's not losing its truth or power, but at the same time, it's having the effect that you want it to have.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your healing ministry. I mean, what draws you to it? I can imagine when you talk about your own healing that you had to go through as a young adult, as a seminarian, and as a priest. You've had some healing to do. What draws you to want to help people heal? And tell us about that ministry.
Yeah, have you ever heard of this idea of the wounded healer? Right. Okay. So I think people that are drawn to it, I mean, not all, but some, have understand pain, understand suffering, And for many years, I didn't understand what mine was, or why. But then, you do get to a point where you get help. You get, you understand like the genesis of some of these things. And so for me, that was the case, things that happened as a child and, early exposure, when I was a young boy, I was exposed to pornography, like from a neighborhood friend, at a very young age, and that stuff has an impact on you.
In our time, that was back then. I'm sure it was probably a Playboy magazine or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And
exactly. It wasn't
they found in their dad's garage or something. And I think all of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s remember some kind of early exposure like that, but that has an impact.
Yeah. And today it's even worse, right? Because
it's on their phone.
It's on the phone instantly, right? Yeah. So
far more graphic and far more video and everything.
Yeah, it pervades everything now.
Yeah.
Well, now it pervades TV, right? And so there was that, and some other bad experiences that I had as a child that were from people outside the family. Okay, so this isn't about my family. This was people outside it, and so all of that kind of shapes you and forms you, right? And it distorts your view of yourself. Excuse me, of yourself and of the world around you. But at the same time, there was always something in my heart that said, I love God and I want God, but I don't feel worthy of God, right? And so for me, I didn't recognize it, but that was the evil one, right? He had already, I had already made agreements with his lies, with his, he had tried to shape an identity in me that I was accepting. But once I was able to figure this out, as I got older and started to find healing, then I knew that my path was, because knowing that I wanted to do something to help people at an early age, I said, this is the path.
Yeah.
Right? To be a source or an instrument of healing. Right? To be a work of God in the world, not of my own doing because I have no power, but because God will work through me.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, it allows you to be a part of God's work in the world, of the building up of His kingdom in a way that it doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be showy. It does, as a matter of fact, it reminds me of Saint Joseph, right? Quiet. He was a leader. But he was a quiet leader, He liked to sleep. I like to sleep. He got his best visions when he was sleeping, right? So, it's that quiet working behind the scenes thing to help people. And so in many ways, it's just a ministry of presence, a ministry of listening, a ministry of prayer, above all, and guiding people to almost heal themselves, through the grace of God, to recognize that they have power to overcome a lot of these things, because Jesus will work in them and through them. And so that's what I try to communicate to people when they need healing. And I'm talking mostly about spiritual healing here.
Sure.
Physical healing can happen. I've had one specific experience where I felt that. But most of the time, it's just about spiritual healing. It's about getting them rooted in their true identity as children of God and getting them back on the path.
When you read Bob Schuch's work, he talks a lot about people getting spiritual healing, and then suddenly their physical healing happens too.
Sure.
Right? Because they're carrying this weight. And then once they're able to talk to someone, a spiritual leader that can help them understand where that's coming from and how to heal and how to overcome it, all of a sudden their physical ailments also go
body
away.
Nature, right? Our nature is body and soul.
Right.
So you heal the soul and it helps the body.
Yeah.
And the body, of course, will decay, but the soul goes on. It's eternal, And so that, the whole anointing of the sixth sacrament is about healing of the soul. And sometimes it happens in the body.
Right.
But that it'll happen if it's to glorify God, right? It's to bolster the faith of the people, that a miracle could happen. But mostly it's to prepare the soul to be united with God. And so ultimately that's what I'm trying to do is, not so much to get them happiness in this life forever, but to prepare them for a life of happiness and eternal joy in heaven, right? And that starts now.
Yeah. No, it's. I love that you talked about it because we're recording this the day after Ash Wednesday.
Yeah.
We're reminded that from dust we came, and to dust we shall return. Absolutely. This is but a short time that we spend on earth, and
blink of an eye.
Our job is to prepare for eternity, and we're blessed to have people like you. Let me ask you one final question, because I always want to, because leadership, maybe sometimes it's not about having the answers, right? Sometimes it's creating space for people to grow. So what does it mean to you to lead different?
It means to do the will of God.
Yeah.
I've always tried to think about, I've read good leadership books, I remember being very fascinated about, especially like when Desert Storm happened, I read some of the generals' books, and things like that. So I've always been fascinated by that. But I think ultimately for a priest, I'm grounded in leadership the way Jesus did it, right? And that is to, do the will of the Father and to bring others to do the will of the Father. And so as long as I'm grounded in every day and trying to do as well, even if I fail, in doing it perfectly or whatever, God sees that. He sees that that's my desire. And he knows my weaknesses, and he knows where I'm strong. And, it's only through his will that I'm here. right? And that I've been given this vocation and these responsibilities, and that's a serious weight,
Right.
to have not only being a pastor, but to have the weight of the care of souls on you,
Right.
and so it makes you think deeply about it.
Yeah. No, that's a really great answer. We're so glad you're here. Guys, if you got something out of the episode today, if you learned something new, if you liked Father Michael's answers, please, or if you have a question, put it in the show, put it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. The Lead Different podcast. We're going to be airing this very soon. Can't wait to share your thoughts. And Father Michael, why don't we end the show on that note?
Why not?
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. It's always good to talk to you. This was a fun conversation. I know our listeners and our leaders out there are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week on the Lead Different podcast.
This is Lead Different.
What if leadership isn't about building influence?
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.